A homeless girl turns a piece of cardboard into her greatest treasure. What seemed like an illusion awakens secrets capable of changing lives forever. Chapter 1. The Man Who Had Everything. On a grey Monday morning in New York City, the fine drizzle blanketing the Manhattan skyline contrasted sharply with the luxurious gleam of Michael Anderson's penthouse. The panoramic windows of his Fifth Avenue residence offered a commanding view of Central Park, now shrouded in mist, but Michael barely noticed the scenery anymore. It had long become just another asset in his portfolio of possessions. At 48, Michael had mastered the art of efficiency. As the CEO of Anderson Technologies, a Fortune 500 company specializing in agricultural technology solutions and software development, he'd built an empire valued in billions. His schedule was a masterpiece of precision. Meetings timed to the minute, international conference calls arranged across time zones, investment portfolios that multiplied with seemingly algorithmic predictability. "Mr. Anderson, your car is ready," announced the discreet voice of his assistant through the intercom. Michael straightened his tie, a silk Hermes piece in navy blue, and grabbed his briefcase. No detail in his appearance was left to chance. Every element projected the image of success and control. He'd cultivated this persona meticulously over decades, burying any remnants of the uncertain young man he'd once been beneath layers of accomplishment and wealth. The elevator descended 80 floors without stopping, another privilege of his position. In the lobby, his security team waited with practiced professionalism. No words were exchanged beyond necessary acknowledgements as they escorted him to the armored Maybach waiting at the curb. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," said Frank, his driver of 15 years. "Traffic's heavy on the usual route. Would you like to take the alternate through downtown?" Michael nodded, already opening his tablet to review quarterly projections. "Whatever's fastest, Frank." As the car pulled away from the building, Michael immersed himself in reports and emails, the silence in the vehicle broken only by the occasional tap of his finger on the screen. Emotional attachments were inefficiencies he'd systematically eliminated from his life. Colleagues described him as brilliant but cold. Business rivals feared his analytical precision. Financial publications praised his visionary leadership, while hinting at his notorious detachment. Michael considered these observations irrelevant. Sentiment had no place in success. The car slowed as it navigated the narrower streets of Lower Manhattan, deviating from the usual path to corporate headquarters in Midtown. Michael barely registered the change until an unusual sound penetrated his concentration, something melodic yet incomplete. He glanced up, irritated by the distraction. Under the awning of an old building partially sheltered from the drizzle, a small figure huddled over what appeared to be a piece of cardboard. Michael squinted through the tinted windows. A girl, no more than 11 or 12, was moving her fingers across the cardboard with deliberate precision. Looking closer, he realized the cardboard had been meticulously drawn to resemble piano keys. "Frank, slow down," he ordered, surprising himself with the command. The car eased to a crawl, and Michael observed the girl more carefully. Her concentration was absolute as her fingers danced across the makeshift instrument. She wore a faded blue coat too large for her thin frame, and a red knit hat covered most of her light brown hair. What struck him most was the seriousness in her movements. This wasn't some random childish game, but a disciplined, technical exercise. "Stop the car," he said. Frank pulled over, looking questioningly in the rearview mirror. "Sir?" Michael didn't respond. He continued watching the girl through the window. There was something methodical in her finger movements that suggested training. The realization irritated him, likely some elaborate performance to elicit sympathy from passers-by. Street performers were common enough in New York. But something about this particular scene felt like a calculated manipulation. "Wait here," he said, surprising both his security team and himself as he stepped out of the vehicle. The drizzle immediately clung to his custom suit as he approached the girl. Up close he could hear her humming softly, a melody that matched the movements of her fingers. With a jolt of recognition, Michael identified the piece, Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu in C-sharp minor, a composition challenging even for accomplished pianists. The absurdity of the situation struck him. How would a child in these circumstances be familiar with such complex classical music? The incongruity reinforced his suspicion of a clever scheme. "That's Chopin you're playing," he stated flatly, standing a few feet from her. The girl looked up, startled by his presence. Her eyes were an unusual shade of blue-gray, intelligent and wary. She nodded once but didn't speak. "It's quite a difficult piece," Michael continued, his tone skeptical, "even for professional pianists." "I know," she replied simply. Her voice was soft but clear, devoid of the defensiveness he'd expected. "Where did you learn it?" "My mother taught me." Her fingers stilled on the cardboard piano, but her posture remained poised, as if she were sitting at a real instrument. Michael felt a surge of disbelief, mixed with an uncomfortable curiosity. "And does your mother know you're out here pretending to play piano on cardboard?" A shadow passed over the girl's face. "She's not here anymore." Something in her expression gave Michael pause, but he pressed on. "So you're claiming you can actually play this piece? On a real piano?" "I don't claim things," she answered with unexpected dignity. "I can play it." The certainty in her voice challenged him. Michael, accustomed to controlling every interaction, found himself responding in a way that seemed to come from somewhere outside his carefully constructed self. "If you can actually play that piece, truly play it in a way that would impress someone who knows music, I'll—" He paused, a reckless thought forming. "I'll adopt you." The words hung in the damp air between them, as surprising to him as they must have been to her. He hadn't intended to say anything so absurd. It had emerged as a sarcastic challenge, with no real intention behind it. Yet there it was, spoken aloud on a grey New York morning to a stranger. The girl's response was not what he expected. There was no shock, no excitement, no disbelief. Instead, she regarded him with those steady blue-gray eyes and said, "Okay, when?" Michael blinked, momentarily disconcerted. He had expected his challenge to end the conversation, to expose what he assumed was a performance. Instead, her ready acceptance threw him off balance. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "You don't believe me," she stated. Not a question, but a simple observation. "No, I don't," Michael admitted. "That's okay," she replied with unexpected composure. "People usually don't at first." Something about her self-possession irritated him further. Children weren't supposed to be this composed, this certain, especially children sitting on sidewalks with cardboard pianos. "Fine," he said, making a decision that would later seem inexplicable even to himself. "Carnegie Hall, 4 o'clock this afternoon." The prestigious venue hosted a foundation he supported financially, giving him access most couldn't dream of. "If you're serious, be there at the stage door on 56th Street. She nodded once, folding the cardboard piano with careful movements. "I'll be there." Michael returned to his car, already pulling out his phone to reschedule the afternoon's meetings, appointments he would have considered immovable just minutes earlier. Something about this encounter had disrupted his carefully ordered existence, and though he couldn't name what it was, he found himself unwilling to dismiss it. "Change of plans? Frank," he said as he settled into the leather seat, "we're keeping the car for the day." As they pulled away, Michael glanced back at the girl, who was tucking the folded cardboard into a worn backpack. For the first time in years, Michael Anderson had made a spontaneous decision, one that followed no strategic plan or financial calculation. The realization was disconcerting, and yet beneath his discomfort lurked something else, a long-dormant sense of curiosity that had once, long ago, been as much a part of him as the coldness he now cultivated. Chapter 2. The Impossible Performance. Throughout the day, Michael found it impossible to focus on work. The image of the girl with her cardboard piano kept intruding into his thoughts, disrupting the precision he prided himself on. During a video conference with investors in Tokyo, he caught himself wondering if she would actually show up at Carnegie Hall. In the middle of reviewing acquisition proposals, he questioned why he had issued such an outlandish challenge. "Cancel my remaining meetings," he told his assistant, Jessica, who looked at him with barely concealed surprise. In 15 years, he had never cleared his schedule so abruptly. "Everything, sir. Including the call with the board about the Singapore expansion?" "Everything." "Reschedule for tomorrow." Jessica nodded, professional enough to hide her curiosity. "And if anyone asks, tell them something came up." Michael turned away, ending the conversation. He had no explanation that would make sense, not even to himself. At 3:30, his car pulled up near Carnegie Hall. Michael sat in silence, questioning his own actions. What was he doing here, waiting for a street kid who almost certainly wouldn't show? And if she did appear, what then? The adoption comment had been pure sarcasm, a challenge he never expected would be taken seriously. Yet here he was, having cancelled millions of dollars worth of business to pursue this bizarre impulse. "Sir," Frank interrupted his thoughts, "someone's approaching." Michael looked out to see the girl walking toward the stage door, still wearing the oversized blue coat and red hat. She had kept her word, which surprised him more than it should have. He stepped out of the car, nodding to Frank to stay behind. "You came," he said as he approached her. "I said I would." Her simple statement carried no reproach, just a matter-of-fact certainty that was disconcerting in its directness. Michael led her to the stage door, where the security guard recognized him immediately. "Mr. Anderson, we weren't expecting you today. Last-minute change of plans, George. This young lady and I need access to the main hall." If George found the request unusual, he didn't show it. The Anderson Foundation's substantial donations to Carnegie Hall ensured few questions were asked. "Of course, sir. It's being prepared for tomorrow's performance, but the stage is clear." They walked through the backstage corridors in silence. Michael noticed how the girl took in her surroundings with quiet intensity, her eyes lingering on the framed photographs of legendary musicians that lined the walls. There was none of the wide-eyed excitement he might have expected, just a focused attention that seemed out of place in someone so young. The main hall was empty, the rows of seats extending into shadowy darkness, while the stage remained illuminated. A magnificent Steinway grand piano stood at center stage, its polished surface gleaming under the lights. Michael had made a call ahead, ensuring not just access to the venue but an audience of sorts. 2 accomplished pianists and a music director from the New York Philharmonic, all connections he'd cultivated through his philanthropic work. The small group waited near the piano, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and slight impatience. Michael had been deliberately vague in his explanation, saying only that he wanted their professional assessment of a young pianist. "Michael, this is unexpected," said Eleanor Winters, the Philharmonic's assistant music director. "Your assistant was rather mysterious about the purpose of this gathering." "Thank you for accommodating me on short notice," Michael replied, avoiding a direct explanation. He gestured to the girl beside him. "This young lady claims she can play Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu." The 3 musicians exchanged glances. Martin Chen, one of the pianists, raised an eyebrow. "That's an ambitious piece for—" He looked at the girl questioningly. "I'm 11, she supplied. "For an 11-year-old, Martin finished, his tone indicating polite skepticism. "She claims her mother taught her," Michael added, making no effort to hide his own doubts. Eleanor studied the girl more closely. "What's your name, dear?" "Lily," the girl answered. "Do you read music, Lily?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you've had formal training?" "With my mother, since I was 4. Michael watched this exchange with growing impatience. Perhaps we should simply hear her play. That would answer all questions. Eleanor nodded. "Of course." She gestured toward the piano. "Whenever you're ready, Lily." The girl, Lily, stepped onto the stage with surprising confidence. Her small figure looked almost lost against the vastness of the hall, but she approached the Steinway with familiarity, adjusting the bench before sitting down. She removed her worn mittens and placed them carefully beside her. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment as she closed her eyes, seeming to gather herself. Michael folded his arms, ready to witness the failure he'd anticipated. The entire exercise would prove what he'd suspected all along, that she was just another clever street performer with a story designed to elicit sympathy. Then he could return to his ordered life, the strange impulse that had brought him here satisfied and dismissed. The first notes filled the hall. Michael's certainty evaporated. The opening cascade of the Fantaisie Impromptu flowed from her fingers with a precision that immediately silenced the small audience. But it wasn't just technical accuracy that stunned them. It was the emotional depth, the interpretation that transformed the notes from mere sounds into a narrative of feeling. Her small hands moved across the keyboard with both confidence and vulnerability, capturing the piece's challenging rhythmic contrasts and melodic beauty. Michael stood motionless, his disbelief shifting into something else entirely. Beside him, Eleanor Winters leaned forward, her professional composure momentarily abandoned. Martin Chen's skeptical expression had transformed into rapt attention, while the third musician, David Rosenthal, a renowned concert pianist, had closed his eyes, seemingly lost in the performance. As Lily played the middle section with its lyrical, dreamlike quality, Michael felt something unexpected stir within him. It had been years since he'd allowed music or any art to affect him emotionally. He'd attended countless performances at this very venue, always as a patron and benefactor, never as a true listener. Now, watching this child bring Chopin to life, he experienced an unwelcome crack in his carefully constructed armor. When the final notes faded into silence, no one spoke immediately. The acoustics of Carnegie Hall held the echo for a moment before complete quiet descended. David Rosenthal was the first to break the silence. "Where did you study?" he asked, his voice carrying across the empty auditorium. Lily looked up from the piano. "At home, my mother was a pianist." "Was?" Eleanor asked gently. "She's gone now," Lily replied, the same phrase she had used earlier with Michael. Michael found his voice. "That was unexpected." "It was extraordinary," Eleanor corrected him. "I've heard conservatory students twice her age who couldn't play with that level of emotional intelligence." Martin nodded in agreement. "The technical proficiency alone is remarkable, but there's something more. A maturity in her interpretation that can't be taught." David approached the stage, addressing Lily directly. "Would you play something else for us? Perhaps the Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major?" Lily nodded and without hesitation began the piece. Once again, the hall filled with music that seemed impossible coming from someone so young. Michael watched in continued amazement, his cynicism evaporating with each note. After the second piece concluded, David turned to Michael with intensity. "This child is a prodigy. Wherever you found her, whatever her circumstances, she needs proper training, proper support. Talent like this comes along perhaps once in a generation." Before Michael could respond, the stage door opened and an elderly man entered, moving slowly but purposefully down the center aisle. His weathered face held a mixture of concern and determination as he approached the stage. "Lily," he called, his voice carrying a slight tremor, "I've been looking everywhere for you." The girl turned toward the sound, her expression showing recognition and a flash of guilt. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I had to come." He said, "It's all right," the old man interrupted, reaching the foot of the stage. He looked up at Michael with a guarded expression. "So you're the man who made her the promise?" Michael frowned. "You know about that?" "She told me this morning after you left. Said some businessman in a fancy suit challenged her to play at Carnegie Hall, and if she impressed you, you'd adopt her." The man shook his head. "I told her it was just some cruel joke, but she insisted on coming." Eleanor and the other musicians looked at Michael with sudden understanding and disapproval. "It wasn't meant as a serious offer," Michael said stiffly. "I didn't believe she could actually play." "Well, now you've heard her," the old man said. "I'm John Reynolds, her grandfather. And you are?" "Michael Anderson." A flash of recognition crossed John's face, followed by something darker. "Anderson? Hannah's brother?" The question hit Michael like a physical blow. He stared at the old man, then at the girl at the piano, seeing her face, really seeing it for the first time. The blue-gray eyes that had seemed merely unusual now became hauntingly familiar. "Hannah?" he repeated, the name feeling strange on his lips after so many years of deliberate silence. "Hannah was her mother?" John's expression hardened. "You didn't even recognize your own niece, did you? Too busy with your billions to notice your sister's child playing piano on the street." The musicians exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing they were witnessing something deeply personal. "I didn't know," Michael said, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "Hannah and I haven't spoken in 20 years, John finished for him. "I know. She told me everything before she—" He glanced at Lily, choosing his words carefully. "Before she left us." Michael looked at the girl, his niece, who was watching this exchange with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. The world he had so carefully ordered was suddenly tilting off its axis, throwing everything into question. The child he had approached with scorn and disbelief was his own flesh and blood, the daughter of the sister he had shut out of his life decades ago. "I think," Eleanor said quietly to her colleagues, "we should give them some privacy." The three musicians nodded and began moving toward the exit, but not before Eleanor added, "Mr. Anderson, that child has extraordinary talent. Whatever else is happening here, please don't let it go to waste." As they departed, Michael, John and Lily remained. In the vast empty hall, connected by a shared past none of them had anticipated confronting today, the echo of Lily's performance still seemed to hang in the air. A reminder of beauty emerging from the most unexpected circumstances. Chapter 3. Blood and Legacy. The tension in Michael's office the following morning was palpable. John Reynolds sat stiffly in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, his weathered hands resting on his knees. Lily sat beside him, taking in the expansive Manhattan view with quiet interest. After the shocking revelation at Carnegie Hall, Michael had arranged for them to meet here away from public eyes. His assistant had been instructed to hold all calls and visitors, an unprecedented request that had earned him another surprised look. "I still can't believe Hannah never told you about Lily," John said. Breaking the uncomfortable silence, Michael's jaw tightened. "Hannah and I weren't exactly on speaking terms." "That's putting it mildly," John replied. "But still a child—" He shook his head. "Hannah had her reasons, I suppose." Michael studied his niece more carefully now. In the harsh morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the resemblance to his sister was undeniable. The same delicate features, the same intelligent eyes. It was like looking at a ghost from his past, a connection to a part of his life he'd methodically excised. "How long has Hannah been gone?" Michael asked, carefully choosing his words. 3 years now," John answered, his voice softening. "Cancer, it was quick at least." Lily remained silent, her expression carefully neutral, but Michael noticed how her fingers moved slightly, as if playing an invisible instrument, a self-soothing gesture. "Perhaps. And you've been caring for Lily since then?" John nodded. "Hannah and Lily lived with me after Hannah got sick. I've done my best, but—" He gestured vaguely at himself. "I'm 74 with a bad heart, living on Social Security in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Not exactly ideal circumstances for raising a child, especially one with Lily's talents." "Why didn't you contact me?" Michael asked, an edge creeping into his voice. John's eyes hardened. "Contact you? After what happened between you and Hannah, she made me promise never to ask you for anything." He paused, studying Michael's face. "Besides, would you have responded if I had?" Michael had no answer to that. 3 years ago, he likely would have had his assistant deal with the matter, perhaps arranging some financial support while keeping personal involvement to a minimum. The thought made him uncomfortable now. "I assume Hannah was still teaching piano before she became ill?" Michael asked, changing the subject. "She was," John confirmed. "She had a small studio of students, mostly children from the neighborhood. She was good at it, had a special way with the kids who struggled." His expression softened with pride. "But her real focus was always Lily. She recognized her talent early." "Did she perform?" Michael asked, directing the question to Lily. "Your mother, I mean." Lily shook her head. "Not professionally. She said she preferred teaching." There was a slight hesitation before she added, "She said performing for audiences wasn't her path." Michael noted the careful phrasing. Hannah had been a gifted pianist in her youth, perhaps as gifted as her daughter, but she'd abandoned a promising career at Juilliard around the time of their estrangement. He'd never known why. "Mr. Anderson," John said, leaning forward slightly, "I didn't come here to rake up old history or to ask for your help. Lily insisted on keeping that appointment yesterday, and now here we are. But we should probably go." As John began to rise, Michael's office door opened, revealing Jessica, his assistant. Her carefully composed expression told him immediately that something was amiss. "I apologize for the interruption, Mr. Anderson, but there's a Mr. Patrick Cooper here insisting on seeing you. He says it's a family matter that can't wait." Michael frowned. "Patrick Cooper?" "Your cousin," John supplied, his expression darkening. "Hannah's cousin, too, on your mother's side. He's been sniffing around since Hannah's passing." Before Michael could respond, a man pushed past Jessica into the office. Patrick Cooper had the superficial good looks of someone who invested heavily in maintaining appearances. Tailored suit, artificially whitened smile, carefully styled hair with just enough gray to suggest maturity without conceding to age. Michael recognized him vaguely from family gatherings decades ago, though they'd had little contact since. "Michael! Long time no see, cousin." Patrick's voice carried the polished insincerity of a seasoned salesman. His gaze swept the room, landing on Lily with calculated interest. "And this must be Hannah's daughter. The family resemblance is striking." "How did you know I was here?" John asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Patrick smiled thinly. "New York's a small town when you know the right people. Word gets around about a young piano prodigy playing at Carnegie Hall, especially when she's accompanied by a billionaire tech mogul." He turned to Michael. "I've been trying to connect with you for weeks, cousin. Your gatekeepers are very effective." "What do you want, Patrick?" Michael asked bluntly. "Straight to business." "I've always appreciated that about you." Patrick settled himself uninvited into the third chair. "I'm here about Hannah's estate, specifically about Lily's inheritance and guardianship." "There is no estate," John said sharply. "Hannah didn't have much to leave." Patrick's smile widened. "That's where you're wrong, John. Hannah was quite clever with the little she had." He extracted a folder from his briefcase and placed it on Michael's desk. "Hannah made an investment 20 years ago, a rather significant one as it turns out." Michael opened the folder to find legal documents and financial statements. As he scanned them, his breath caught. They detailed a substantial investment in Anderson Technologies during its earliest days, an investment made in Lily's name, with Hannah as trustee until the child reached adulthood. "This is impossible," Michael said, looking up from the papers. "Anderson Technologies was privately funded. We never took external investment in our startup phase." "Not officially, perhaps," Patrick countered. "But Hannah found a way. Through a shell company, Reynolds Ventures. The paperwork is all there. Her initial investment of $50,000, presumably her inheritance from your parents, is now worth approximately $27 million. Michael stared at the documents, memories rushing back. In the early days of his company, when he was desperate for capital, a small investment had come through from an anonymous entity. He'd been too focused on survival to question it deeply, and later, when success came, it had seemed insignificant compared to the company's overall valuation. Hannah invested in my company. The concept seemed impossible given the bitterness of their separation. "Ironic, isn't it?" Patrick said. "The sister you cut out of your life essentially bet her entire inheritance on your success. And won spectacularly, I might add." John looked equally stunned. "Hannah never mentioned any investment to me. She was always so careful with money, counting every penny." "She wouldn't have," Patrick said. "The terms of the investment included a strict confidentiality clause. I only discovered it myself recently, while helping John sort through some of Hannah's paperwork." He glanced at the older man. "Though I'm surprised she didn't mention it to you in her final days." John's expression suggested he was questioning the same thing. "So, what's your interest in this, Patrick?" Michael asked, his business instincts awakening to potential threats. "Why are you involving yourself in Hannah's affairs?" Patrick's smile never wavered. "Family concern, of course. Lily is my first cousin once removed. With poor John's health issues, I've been looking into assuming guardianship. It would be the responsible thing to do." "That's the first I've heard of it," John said, anger coloring his words. "You visited exactly twice in 3 years, both times asking about Hannah's finances." Patrick waved a dismissive hand. "You're not getting any younger, John. Lily deserves stability." He turned to Michael. "But now that Big Uncle Michael has reappeared, perhaps there's a better solution. After all, blood ties are important, especially when there are complex financial considerations." The calculated nature of Patrick's interest was transparent. Michael had encountered enough opportunists in business to recognize the type. What troubled him more was the revelation about Hannah's investment. Why would his sister, after their bitter falling out, invest her inheritance in his fledgling company? "There's more," Patrick continued, turning to a specific page in the folder. "The investment came with conditions. The funds and the resulting shares are held in trust for Lily, but can only be accessed under specific circumstances. One being that she reaches the age of 21. The other," he paused for effect, "that she be under the legal guardianship of a blood relative." "What are you suggesting?" Michael asked, though he already sensed where this was heading. "Simply that Lily's future, both her considerable musical talent and her substantial inheritance, requires proper management. John's done his best, but let's be realistic about his limitations. Patrick leaned forward. As her closest male relatives, you and I are the obvious candidates for guardianship. And with your resources, Michael, you could certainly provide advantages I couldn't match. Private, tutors, music schools, concerts, the world open to a true prodigy. Throughout this exchange, Lily had remained silent, but Michael noticed her watching intently, missing nothing. There was a composure to her that seemed incongruent with her age, a quality that reminded him not just of Hannah, but of himself. I believe this is a conversation for another time, Michael said firmly. Mr. Reynolds and Lily have had enough surprises for one day. Patrick looked disappointed but not deterred. Of course, family matters shouldn't be rushed. He rose, straightening his jacket. But the matter will need resolution soon. The trust documentation requires guardianship to be established within 6 months of discovery of the assets, or the entire amount reverts to charitable causes Hannah designated. After Patrick departed, an uncomfortable silence settled over the office. John looked worn, the morning's revelations aging him visibly. Lily's expression remained difficult to read, though her fingers had stilled their invisible playing. Hannah invested in your company, John said finally, his voice a mixture of disbelief and something like wonder. After everything that happened between you, Michael nodded, equally perplexed. It appears so. Did she ever try to contact you after she made the investment? No, Michael admitted. Or if she did, it never got through to me. The possibility that his staff might have filtered out communication from his estranged sister had never occurred to him until now, and the thought was unsettling. John studied him for a long moment. There's something else you should know. Hannah left a letter for you. She made me promise to give it to you only if you and Lily ever met. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope, yellowed slightly with age. I've carried it with me every day since she passed, just in case. Michael accepted the envelope, his name written on the front in handwriting he hadn't seen in decades, but instantly recognized. The sight of it sent an unexpected pang through him. I think we should go now, John said quietly, rising from his chair. Lily has her lessons this afternoon. Lessons? Michael asked, momentarily confused. At the community music center, John explained. They've been giving her free instruction since she couldn't anymore. It's not Carnegie Hall, but the teachers are dedicated. Michael nodded, suddenly aware of the vast gulf between his world and theirs. I'd like to continue this conversation, perhaps later this week. There's much to discuss. About the guardianship? John asked, a protective edge entering his voice. About everything, Michael replied. Hannah's letter, the investment, Lily's future. As they prepared to leave, Michael found himself addressing his niece directly for the first time since learning of their relationship. Your playing yesterday was extraordinary. Your mother taught you well. Lily met his gaze with those disconcertingly familiar eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Then, after a pause, did you mean what you said? About adopting me if I played well? The directness of the question caught Michael off guard. Before he could formulate a response, John intervened. Lily, that's not appropriate to ask. It's all right, Michael said, finding himself in the unusual position of not knowing the right answer. In business, he prided himself on decisive clarity. Now faced with this child, this newly discovered piece of his past and possibly his future, he felt uncharacteristically uncertain. I didn't expect you to play as you did, he admitted finally. I didn't expect any of this. Lily nodded, seeming to understand what he wasn't saying. That's okay. Adults make promises they don't mean all the time. Something in her matter-of-fact acceptance struck Michael more deeply than recrimination would have. As they left his office, he remained at his desk, Hannah's unopened letter in his hands, wondering what words his sister had left for him after 20 years of silence, and why she had invested in his success while accepting his absence from her life. Chapter 4. The Letter. Michael sat alone in his penthouse that evening, Hannah's unopened letter resting on the glass coffee table before him. Outside, New York's skyline glittered with its usual indifference to human dramas. For hours he'd moved through his familiar spaces, the minimalist living room with its curated art, the sleek kitchen he rarely used, the home office equipped with technology more advanced than most corporate headquarters, feeling like a stranger in his own life. Twice he'd reached for the letter, and twice he'd withdrawn his hand. The last words he'd exchanged with Hannah had been harsh, final. He'd spent 20 years constructing a narrative that justified their estrangement, a story where his sister's idealism was naivete, her criticisms of his choices merely jealousy disguised as moral concern. This letter threatened that carefully maintained interpretation. His phone vibrated with messages, business matters that normally would command his immediate attention. Tonight they seemed distant, almost irrelevant. The revelation that Hannah had invested her inheritance in his company had shaken him more than he cared to admit. It contradicted everything he'd believed about their relationship, suggesting a faith in him that he hadn't shown in return. Finally, Michael picked up the envelope. The paper felt fragile, Hannah's handwriting both foreign and achingly familiar. With uncharacteristic hesitation, he opened it and unfolded the pages within. Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then you've met Lily, and the wall of silence between our lives has finally cracked. I've asked John to keep this letter until that moment, hoping it would come while I was still here to witness it. If you're reading it now, then fate had other plans. I need to explain about Lily first. She is your niece, but there's more to her story than that. She inherited her musical gift from both sides of her family. From me, yes, but also from her father. I met him during my last year at Juilliard, before everything between us fell apart. His name was Robert Winters, a visiting conductor from Boston. Our relationship was brief but intense. When I discovered I was pregnant, he had already returned to his life and his wife. I chose to raise Lily alone with no claim on Robert or his family. My decision came from pride, perhaps, but also from knowing that entanglement with the Winters would bring complications Lily didn't need. If you've heard her play, you've witnessed what matters most, her extraordinary gift. Robert's contribution ended with her conception, while mine has been to nurture that gift every day since. Now, about the investment. Yes, I put my inheritance into Anderson Technologies. Not out of forgiveness, I was still too hurt for that, but out of belief. Beneath all our differences, I never doubted your brilliance, Michael. I knew you would succeed. The investment was my hedge against uncertainty, my way of ensuring Lily would have options I couldn't otherwise provide. I never told you, because I knew you would reject it, reject us, out of the same pride that kept me from contacting Robert. Our family has always excelled at stubbornness, hasn't it? But I've made the money Lily's, not mine, with conditions designed to protect her interests. By now, Patrick has likely discovered this arrangement. Be wary of him, Michael. His concern has always been for himself first. There is one last thing you should know, something I've never told another soul. The night before you launched Anderson Technologies, when you came to me desperate for capital after the venture firm pulled out, I almost gave you the money directly. I stood outside your apartment with a check in hand, ready to offer the very inheritance I later invested secretly. But I heard you on the phone, telling someone that you were done with Hannah's sanctimonious judgments and better off without family complications. I walked away that night, believing you wanted nothing to do with me. Perhaps I should have confronted you, forced a conversation, but pride got the better of me, as it did you. Instead, I found another way to invest, convinced that whatever lay between us, your success would ultimately benefit my daughter. If you're reading this, Michael, then Lily needs you now. Not your money, though the inheritance rightfully belongs to her, but you. Your guidance, your protection, your family connection. John is a wonderful man who has given her stability and love, but he cannot provide what she needs to develop her gift fully, nor can he protect her from those who might exploit her talent or her inheritance. I don't ask for forgiveness. What happened between us 20 years ago was complex, with blame on both sides. I ask only that you see Lily clearly, not through the lens of our broken relationship. She has my stubbornness and your analytical mind. She needs structure, but rebels against control. She feels music the way others feel emotions, directly, viscerally, without translation. Whatever you decide, know that in my own way I never stopped believing in you, even when I couldn't bring myself to bridge the silence between us. Your sister, Hannah... Michael lowered the letter, his composed facade finally cracking. The revelation about Robert Winters, Eleanor Winters' brother if he wasn't mistaken, explained the music director's intense reaction to Lily's playing. More shocking was Hannah's disclosure about that night 20 years ago. He remembered the phone conversation she'd overheard, remembered his anger and frustration, but had never known she was outside his door, never realized his words had driven her away at the precise moment he most needed help. The irony was almost unbearable. His company, the empire he'd built, had been saved in part by his sister's secret investment, the very sister whose support he'd rejected. All these years, he'd told himself that Hannah had abandoned him when he needed her most, using that perceived betrayal to justify cutting her from his life. The truth was far more complicated and left him nowhere to hide from his own role in their estrangement. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He quickly wiped moisture from his eyes, surprised to find himself so affected. His security team knew better than to allow unexpected visitors, especially at this hour. "Mr. Anderson," called the voice of his building's security chief. "I apologize for the intrusion, but there's a Ms. Winters here insisting on seeing you. She says it's regarding a family matter that can't wait." Eleanor Winters. Michael carefully refolded Hannah's letter and placed it in his desk drawer before composing himself and opening the door. Eleanor stood in the hallway, her professional demeanor from Carnegie Hall replaced by evident agitation. "I apologize for coming unannounced, but after what happened yesterday, I felt I needed to speak with you directly." Michael nodded, gesturing for her to enter. "I was going to contact you tomorrow about Lily's audition. This isn't about her audition, though her talent is certainly part of it." Eleanor moved into the living room, declining Michael's offer of a drink. "It's about who she is. After you left yesterday, I made some calls. The resemblance bothered me, you see. And when John Reynolds mentioned Hannah's name," she paused. "Hannah was Robert's student at Juilliard, wasn't she? Robert Winters, my brother." Michael studied Eleanor's face, seeing now the family resemblance he'd missed before. "Yes, according to Hannah's letter, though she never told him about the pregnancy." Eleanor nodded as if confirming a suspicion. Robert mentioned her over the years, one of his most promising students who disappeared suddenly. He never knew why. She hesitated. "Robert passed away 5 years ago, heart attack during a rehearsal." "I'm sorry," Michael said automatically. His wife, his widow, has no children of her own. If she knew about Lily. Eleanor left the implication hanging. Michael understood immediately. Another complication in an already complicated situation. "Exactly." Eleanor paced the room, stopping before the wall of windows. "That child has extraordinary talent, Mr. Anderson, the kind that appears perhaps once in a generation. But talent isn't enough. She needs the right environment, the right guidance." "And you believe you can provide that?" Michael asked, a protective instinct he hadn't known he possessed, surfacing unexpectedly. Eleanor turned to face him. "The Philharmonic has a program for exceptional young musicians. Private instruction, performance opportunities, academic support, everything she would need to develop properly. I could arrange for her immediate admission." "That's very generous," Michael acknowledged, "but there are guardianship issues to consider." "Yes, I gathered that from yesterday's interaction. The grandfather seems devoted, but," she chose her words carefully, "limited in what he can provide. And there was mention of adoption." Michael grimaced. "A misunderstanding. I made a thoughtless challenge before I knew who she was." "Before you knew she was your niece," Eleanor clarified. "Yes." Eleanor's gaze was direct, assessing. "And now that you know, what are your intentions regarding Lily?" The question caught Michael off guard. For decades, he'd made decisions based on calculated advantage, clear metrics of profit and loss. Personal relationships had been secondary, disposable when they conflicted with his goals. Now, faced with his sister's orphaned daughter, a child with extraordinary gifts and complicated needs, he found his usual decision-making framework inadequate. "I'm still processing the situation," he admitted. "Don't process too long," Eleanor advised. "That girl needs stability, and soon. The musical world can be predatory toward young talents. Without proper protection, she'll be exploited by agents, teachers, competition organizers. I've seen it happen too many times." "And your interest in this situation?" Michael asked, his business instincts prompting natural suspicion. "Professional and personal," Eleanor answered frankly. "Professionally, talents like Lily's deserve cultivation. Personally," she hesitated, "Robert never knew he had a daughter. I never knew I had a niece. Finding her now feels like a second chance of sorts. A connection to my brother I thought was lost." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang, John Reynolds's number appearing on the screen. He excused himself to answer it. "John, is everything all right?" The old man's voice was strained, breathless. "It's my heart. I'm at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. The doctors say it's not critical yet, but—" He paused, and Michael could hear the effort it took for him to continue. "Lily's here with me. She's trying to be brave, but she's scared. I have no one else to call." "I'll be there right away," Michael said without hesitation. "Which floor?" "4th. Cardiac unit." John's voice weakened. "Michael, if anything happens—" "To me—" "I'm on my way," Michael interrupted, unwilling to hear the rest. "Just focus on staying calm." He ended the call and turned to Eleanor. "I have to go. John Reynolds is in the hospital. Heart problems." Eleanor nodded, immediately understanding the implications. "I'll come with you. Lily shouldn't be alone there, and you two barely know each other." Michael didn't argue. Within minutes they were in his car, Frank navigating through late-evening traffic toward Brooklyn. The city lights blurred outside the windows as Michael found himself heading toward a hospital to support a man he barely knew, and a child he'd just discovered was his niece. A complete departure from the controlled isolation he'd maintained for decades. "You said Robert's widow has no children?" he asked Eleanor suddenly. She glanced at him. "No, Judith and Robert tried, but it never happened for them." "Would she, if she knew about Lily, would she want custody?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "Judith is complex. She adored Robert and she appreciates musical talent. But she's also very conscious of appearances, of family reputation. A child born outside the marriage might be difficult for her to accept, especially given her strict Catholic upbringing." She paused. "Though for a talent like Lily's, she might make an exception. The Winters family has always valued musical achievement above almost everything else." The hospital loomed ahead, its windows illuminated against the night sky. As they pulled into the emergency entrance, Michael found himself mentally cataloguing potential threats to Lily's welfare: Patrick's transparent greed, the yet uninformed Winters widow, the medical uncertainty surrounding John, and his own profound unreadiness for any sort of guardian role. Yet beneath these rational concerns lurked something deeper, an awareness that Hannah had entrusted him, however indirectly, with her daughter's future. The weight of that trust, conveyed across years of silence and revealed only after her passing, felt more binding than any legal obligation. As he stepped from the car, Hannah's words from the letter echoed in his mind. "Whatever you decide, know that in my own way, I never stopped believing in you." The revelation stung with both grace and accusation. His sister had believed in him even when he had stopped believing in her. Now, walking toward the hospital entrance with Eleanor beside him, Michael confronted the possibility that everything he'd built his life around, professional success, emotional detachment, absolute self-sufficiency, might prove inadequate for the challenge ahead. For the first time in decades, Michael Anderson was stepping into a situation he couldn't control, couldn't predict, and couldn't escape without cost to his carefully constructed sense of self. Chapter 5. Choices and Consequences. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Michael followed a nurse toward John's room, Eleanor a few steps behind. He'd spent his career in boardrooms and executive suites, environments he controlled and dominated. Here, surrounded by the quiet urgency of medical staff and the muted sounds of monitoring equipment, his usual authority felt hollow. They found Lily sitting alone in a small waiting area, her cardboard piano folded neatly on her lap. She looked up as they approached, her face a careful mask that reminded Michael painfully of himself. "They're doing tests," she said, before either adult could speak. "The doctor said his heart rhythm is irregular." "How are you holding up?" Eleanor asked gently. Lily shrugged with a forced casualness that didn't match the tension in her shoulders. I'm fine. This happened once before, but not this bad. Michael noticed dark circles under her eyes and realized she must have been at the hospital for hours. Have you eaten anything? She shook her head. I'll find something, Eleanor volunteered. You two talk. As Eleanor departed, Michael sat beside his niece, acutely aware of his inexperience with children. In the controlled environment of his office, surrounded by the trappings of his success, he'd been able to maintain emotional distance. Here, with this exhausted child whose life hung in a precarious balance, that distance felt impossible to sustain. Your grandfather's being well cared for, he offered awkwardly. Are you going to send me to foster care if he doesn't get better? Lily asked, the direct question catching him off guard. No, Michael answered immediately, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. That won't happen. Lily studied him with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. Because of what Mom wrote in her letter? Michael hesitated. You know about the letter? I know she left one for you. She told me before she... Lily paused, choosing her words carefully. Before she went away, she said if I ever met you, you'd have decisions to make. The maturity in her phrasing was jarring, a reminder that this child had already navigated losses most adults would find overwhelming. Your mother invested in my company, Michael said, deciding honesty was the only viable approach. Did you know that? Lily nodded. She told me there would be money for college and music school someday. She made me promise to use it wisely. The investment was more substantial than perhaps even she anticipated, Michael explained, watching his niece's reaction carefully. It's grown considerably over the years. Is that why Cousin Patrick came to see us? Lily asked. He keeps talking about managing my financial interests whenever Grandpa isn't in the room. Michael felt a flare of anger at the thought of Patrick attempting to manipulate a child behind her grandfather's back. Partially, yes, but that's something you don't need to worry about right now. That's what adults always say when they're worried, but don't want to talk about it. Lily observed with disconcerting accuracy. Before Michael could respond, a doctor emerged from John's room. Are you family? She asked Michael. I'm Lily's uncle, he replied, the words feeling strange on his tongue. The doctor nodded. Mr. Reynolds is stable for now. We've administered medication to regulate his heart rhythm, but he's going to need more extensive treatment. Possibly surgery. But he'll be okay? Lily asked, her composure slipping slightly. The doctor smiled kindly. We're doing everything we can. He's responding well to the initial treatment. She turned to Michael. He's asking to speak with you privately. Michael nodded, then glanced at Lily. I'll be right back. John Reynolds looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, his weathered face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. Monitoring equipment beeped steadily beside him, IV lines snaking from his arm. Thank you for coming, John said, his voice weaker than it had been that morning. I wasn't sure you would. Of course I came, Michael replied, surprised by the genuine concern he felt. The doctor says you're stabilized. John made a dismissive gesture. For now. But let's not pretend. My heart's been failing for years. This time was worse than before. He shifted, grimacing slightly. That's not why I asked to speak with you. Lily, Michael guessed. Yes. John's gaze was direct despite his physical weakness. I need to know your intentions. Patrick's been circling like a vulture since Hannah passed, but it's gotten worse since he discovered the investment. And now with you in the picture. I'm not Patrick, Michael said, an edge entering his voice. No, John agreed. You're something else entirely. The man who cut his sister out of his life for 20 years. The billionaire who didn't recognize his own niece playing piano on the street. The criticism stung precisely because it was justified. Hannah's letter explained some things, Michael said carefully. Things I didn't know. She loved you, you know, John said, even after everything. Even when she believed you wanted nothing to do with her. She followed your career, kept every article about your success. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Michael thought of Hannah tracking his achievements from a distance, investing in his future while he deliberately expunged her from his past. I made mistakes, Michael admitted, the words unfamiliar on his tongue. We all do, John replied, but some mistakes can't be fixed. You can't give Hannah back the brother she lost. His voice hardened. What you can do is make sure her daughter doesn't lose everything. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to commit, really commit, to Lily's welfare. Not just her financial security, but her happiness, her development. She needs more than money, Michael. She needs family. Before Michael could respond, the door opened and Eleanor entered, followed by Patrick Cooper, whose appearance was as unexpected as it was unwelcome. I heard about your health crisis. John, Patrick said, his concern transparently artificial. I came as soon as I could. How did you know? John demanded. Patrick smiled thinly. I have a contact in hospital administration. Family medical emergencies are exactly the sort of thing concerned relatives should be informed about. Eleanor looked between the men with evident confusion. I brought some food for Lily, she said, clearly sensing the tension. She mentioned you were here, Mr. Cooper. Yes, just doing my familial duty, Patrick replied smoothly. And you are? Eleanor Winters, assistant music director with the New York Philharmonic. She hesitated before adding, and Lily's aunt, it seems. My brother was her father. Patrick's expression registered surprise before settling into calculated consideration. How interesting. Another branch of the family tree emerges. He turned to Michael. The guardianship situation grows more complex by the hour, doesn't it? This isn't the time or place for that discussion, Michael said firmly. On the contrary, Patrick countered. With John's health in such a precarious state, establishing clear guardianship becomes even more urgent. The courts take a dim view of children left in limbo. John struggled to sit up. Lily isn't in limbo. She's with me. For now, Patrick said, his voice falsely gentle. But even you must acknowledge the reality of your condition. Planning for contingencies is simply responsible behavior. Michael recognized the strategy. Create a crisis, then position yourself as the solution. It was a tactic he'd encountered often in business negotiations, though rarely applied so callously to a child's future. Any decisions about Lily's guardianship should include her input, Eleanor interjected, surprising the others. She's young, yes, but she's remarkably mature and has clear opinions about her future. Children don't make legal decisions, Patrick dismissed. Courts and qualified adults do that on their behalf. And what makes you qualified? Michael asked sharply. Patrick's smile tightened. Blood relation. Professional stability. No history of rejecting family members. The last point was directed pointedly at Michael. Plus, I've already filed preliminary guardianship papers, citing John's deteriorating health and your complicated history with the family. You did what? John's heart monitor registered a spike in response to his anger. It's merely precautionary, Patrick assured him. But the courts move slowly, and if decisions need to be made quickly, get out, John said, his voice low but forceful. Now. Patrick looked as though he might argue, then thought better of it. We'll continue this discussion when you're feeling better. At the door he paused. Michael, Eleanor, I assume we'll be seeing more of each other as this situation evolves. I look forward to finding an amicable resolution. After he departed, a heavy silence fell over the room. John's monitor gradually returned to a steadier rhythm as his anger subsided. I should check on Lily, Eleanor said finally. She's been alone too long. When she'd gone, John turned to Michael. Now do you understand why I'm worried? Patrick's never shown any interest in Lily, except as a path to her inheritance. And with this Winters connection emerging, he shook his head. Hannah tried so hard to protect her. Now everything's unraveling. Not everything, Michael said, a decision forming with unexpected clarity. I'll file for guardianship myself. John looked skeptical. You barely know her. Your life isn't set up for a child. I can adapt, Michael insisted. I have resources Patrick doesn't. Not just money, but influence, connections. I can ensure she gets the musical education she deserves. And what about what she needs emotionally? The stability Hannah wanted for her? The question hit a vulnerable point. Michael's life had been deliberately constructed to minimize emotional entanglements. His penthouse, his schedule, his very mindset, none of it accommodated a child, particularly one with Lily's unique needs and talents. I'll figure it out, he said, with more confidence than he felt. It's what Hannah would have wanted. Is it? John challenged. Or is this about easing your conscience over how things ended with your sister? Before Michael could respond, Eleanor returned with Lily. The girl looked between the adults, clearly sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," Michael answered automatically, then corrected himself. "Actually, no. There are some complications we need to discuss." He glanced at Eleanor. "All of us." Eleanor nodded in understanding. "Lily, your family situation is a bit more complex than we initially realized. I mentioned earlier that my brother Robert was your father. That makes me your aunt." Lily absorbed this with remarkable composure. "Mom told me my father was a musician who didn't know about me." She said it was complicated. "It was," Eleanor confirmed gently, "and it's become more so. There are now several adults who have an interest in your future. Your grandfather, your Uncle Michael, your cousin Patrick, and now me. Each of us wants what's best for you, but we might have different ideas about what that means." "Because of the money," Lily said. "Not a question, but a statement." "Partly," Eleanor acknowledged, "but also because of your extraordinary talent, and because family connections matter." John reached for Lily's hand. "And what matters most is what you want, Lily. You're old enough to have a say in this." Lily looked around at the adults. Her grandfather in the hospital bed, her newly discovered uncle and aunt, all watching her expectantly. Michael was struck by the unfairness of the situation, the weight of decisions no 11-year-old should have to make. "I want to keep playing piano," Lily said finally. "I promised Mom I would. And I want—" She hesitated, her composure wavering. "I want to stay with people who won't leave." The simple declaration hung in the air, a child's most basic need laid bare. John squeezed her hand, emotion evident on his face despite his physical weakness. "No one's leaving you," he assured her, though his presence in a hospital bed made the promise ring hollow. Michael found himself remembering Hannah's letter, her faith in him despite everything that had happened between them. He thought of his sister investing in his future, while he actively excluded her from his present. And now her daughter stood before him, asking not for wealth or privilege, but for the one thing his lifestyle had systematically avoided: commitment. "Lily," Michael said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice, "I know we've just met and this is all very sudden, but I'd like you to consider coming to stay with me, at least temporarily while your grandfather recovers." John looked startled. "Michael, I'm not asking for a decision right now," Michael continued. "Just consideration. My home is large enough that you'd have your own space, and there's a piano, a good one. You could practice whenever you wanted. What about school?" Lily asked practically. "We'd figure that out," Michael promised. "Along with proper music instruction. Miss Winters, your Aunt Eleanor, could help with that." Eleanor nodded. "The Philharmonic's youth program would be perfect for you, Lily, and I'd be there to support you through it." John watched this exchange with a mixture of concern and resignation. "This is happening very fast," he cautioned. "Lily needs time to process everything." "Of course," Michael agreed. "Nothing needs to be decided tonight." But even as he said the words, he knew events had already been set in motion that would require decisions sooner rather than later. Patrick's guardianship filing, John's precarious health, the revelation of the Winters connection, all created legal and emotional complications that couldn't be ignored. A nurse entered, checking John's vitals with practiced efficiency. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Reynolds needs to rest now. Visiting hours are over except for immediate family." Michael nodded. "I'll take Lily home with me tonight." "With your permission," he added, looking to John. John hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Just for tonight, while I'm here. She has clothes and school books at our apartment. You'll need to stop there first." "I'll go with them," Eleanor offered, "to help Lily pack what she needs." As they prepared to leave, John beckoned Michael closer. "This isn't a game, Michael," he whispered. "She's not a business acquisition or a charity project. She's Hannah's daughter. If you're going to do this, really do it. Otherwise, walk away now before she gets attached." The warning struck home. Michael had navigated complex business deals worth billions, but this, caring for his sister's orphaned, gifted child, represented a challenge of an entirely different order. It would require him to reorient his life, his priorities, perhaps even his sense of self. The prospect was simultaneously terrifying, and in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "Necessary. I won't walk away," he promised, meaning it in the moment, but aware of how untested that promise remained. As they left the hospital, Lily walking between Michael and Eleanor, the cardboard piano clutched tightly against her chest. Michael felt the weight of his sister's faith and his own decades of distance pressing upon him. Outside, rain had begun to fall again, a fine mist that blurred the city lights and transformed the ordinary urban landscape into something less defined, less certain. They walked toward his waiting car, three people connected by blood and circumstance, but still strangers in all the ways that mattered most. And somewhere in the growing complexity of legal claims and family obligations, Michael recognized the simple truth at the heart of Hannah's letter, that beyond inheritance or talent, or even blood relation, lay the more fundamental question of who would truly see Lily for who she was, and who would stay when staying became difficult. Chapter 6. The Unexpected Harmony. 6 weeks later, Michael stood at the back of the recital hall, watching as Lily took her seat at the grand piano. The audience, mostly parents of other young musicians in the Philharmonic's youth program, fell silent in anticipation. In the front row, John Reynolds sat in a wheelchair, looking frail but alert after his heart surgery. Beside him, Eleanor Winters leaned forward slightly, her expression a mixture of professional assessment and personal investment. The past weeks had transformed Michael's life in ways he still struggled to comprehend. His penthouse, once a monument to minimalist efficiency, now contained evidence of an 11-year-old's presence. Music books stacked neatly on previously empty shelves, a school backpack sometimes left on a kitchen counter, a bedroom that had been rapidly converted from a rarely used guest space into something more personal with Eleanor's help. Most significantly, the piano in his living room, an expensive Bösendorfer he'd purchased years ago as a status symbol but rarely played, had come alive under Lily's touch. The first time she'd approached it, her reverence had been palpable, her fingers hovering above the keys as if seeking permission. When she began to play, the sound that filled the penthouse had seemed to transform the space itself, making it less a showcase and more a home. Now, as she prepared for her first public performance since that impromptu audition at Carnegie Hall, Michael found himself experiencing an unfamiliar emotion, pride mixed with anxiety, a personal investment in someone else's achievement. The legal situation remained complicated. Patrick had pursued his guardianship petition with determined efficiency, leveraging his connections and painting Michael as a wealthy absentee relative suddenly interested in Lily only after discovering her inheritance. The court had appointed a guardian ad litem to represent Lily's interests, a sharp-eyed social worker named Rachel Dawson, who had interviewed everyone involved and observed Lily's living arrangements with both skepticism and thoroughness. To Michael's surprise, John had ultimately supported his petition for temporary guardianship, acknowledging that his own health made him unable to provide the stability Lily needed. "Just don't make me regret it," the old man had warned during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. The Winters connection had added another layer of complexity. After learning about Lily, Judith Winters, Robert's widow, had requested a meeting. Michael had braced for conflict, but the elegant, reserved woman had surprised him. She'd asked thoughtful questions about Lily's musical development and expressed regret at never knowing her husband had a daughter. "Robert would have been proud," she'd said after hearing a recording of Lily's playing. "He valued authenticity in music above all else. She has that quality." Rather than pursuing any claim of her own, Judith had offered to contribute to Lily's musical education through the Winters Foundation, which supported promising young musicians. "It's what Robert would have wanted," she'd explained. No strings attached beyond regular progress reports. The various adults in Lily's life had gradually formed an unexpected coalition, John providing the historical continuity and emotional grounding she needed, Eleanor offering professional guidance for her musical development, Michael providing financial security and daily stability, and even Judith contributing resources without demanding control. Only Patrick remained adversarial, though his position weakened as the others united in their focus on Lily's welfare rather than competing for exclusive influence. As for Michael and Lily, they were learning each other's rhythms with cautious determination. He'd hired a housekeeper who could be present when he couldn't, adjusted his work schedule to accommodate her school and practice routines, and found himself increasingly prioritizing her needs above business demands that once would have been non-negotiable. The transition wasn't seamless. They were both private people with established habits, but a mutual respect had developed that made the adjustments possible. Now, watching as Lily began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, Michael realized how profoundly his perspective had shifted. 6 weeks ago, he'd viewed his life through the lens of acquisition and control. Assets managed, challenges overcome, success quantified in financial terms. Now he found himself caring deeply about a child's happiness and development, measuring success in small moments of connection and growth. The piece Lily had chosen for the recital was deceptively simple, requiring a delicate touch and emotional restraint that many young pianists lacked. Under her fingers, it became something transcendent, not just technically proficient but emotionally authentic. Michael watched the audience respond, their expressions shifting from polite attention to genuine engagement as the familiar melody unfolded with unexpected depth. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the applause began. Michael saw Eleanor nodding in professional approval, John wiping a tear from his weathered cheek, and Lily herself looking simultaneously relieved and energized by the performance. The social worker, Rachel, seated toward the middle of the hall, was making notes on her ever-present clipboard, but her usual detachment seemed tempered by genuine appreciation. After the recital, they gathered in the reception area, an unlikely family unit formed around Lily's talent and needs. John's health had improved enough for short excursions, though full recovery remained uncertain. Eleanor discussed technical aspects of the performance with Lily, offering specific praise and gentle suggestions. Michael found himself in conversation with Rachel Dawson, whose assessment would influence the court's final decision on guardianship. "She's adjusting well," Rachel observed. "Better than I expected, frankly." "She's remarkably resilient," Michael agreed, "and focused. Once we established a routine for school, practice, and free time, things fell into place." Rachel studied him with professional assessment. "And you? How are you adjusting to parenthood?" The question gave him pause. He hadn't thought of the arrangement in those terms, though functionally it resembled parenthood more with each passing day. "It's been educational," he said finally. "I'm learning as I go." "That's honest, at least," Rachel noted with a hint of approval. "Most people in your position would claim it was all perfectly natural from day one." "Nothing about this situation is perfectly natural," Michael admitted. "But we're making it work." Their conversation was interrupted by Patrick's unexpected arrival. He moved through the reception with calculated charm, offering congratulations to Lily and soliciting opinions from other parents about the youth program. When he approached Michael and Rachel, his expression was a careful mask of friendly concern. "Such a lovely performance," he commented. "Lily's talent continues to impress. I hope the current arrangement is supporting her development adequately." Rachel's professional smile revealed nothing. "We're continuing to evaluate all aspects of Lily's situation, Mr. Cooper. The court will make its final determination next month." Of course," Patrick nodded. "I just worry about the stability of her current living situation. Given Mr. Anderson's demanding career and lack of experience with children." He let the implication hang in the air. Before Rachel could respond, Lily herself approached, still holding the bouquet of flowers Eleanor had given her after the performance. "Uncle Michael is teaching me chess," she informed Patrick, her voice casual but her eyes watchful. "And we're reading The Secret Garden together before bed. 20 pages every night except when he has late meetings, but then we do extra the next day to catch up." The simple declaration, delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty, effectively undermined Patrick's insinuations about Michael's involvement in her daily life. Michael felt a surge of unexpected emotion at this evidence of Lily's trust. Patrick's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How nice. Chess is certainly a valuable skill." "So is recognizing when someone is only interested in you for your money," Lily replied with the same calm directness. "My mum taught me that." Rachel suppressed a smile as Patrick struggled to maintain his composure. "Children have such interesting perspectives," he managed finally. "If you'll excuse me, I see someone I should greet." As he retreated, Rachel raised an eyebrow at Lily. "That was very direct." Lily shrugged. "Mom always said there's no point pretending not to notice things that are obvious." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman," Rachel observed. "She was," Lily agreed. a shadow crossing her face before she added, "Uncle Michael is reading her letter tonight." Michael looked at her in surprise. "You know about that. Grandpa told me there was a second part you hadn't read yet. The part she said to save until we knew each other better." John had indeed given Michael another sealed envelope the previous week. "Hannah wrote this part later," he'd explained. "She said you should read it only if you and Lily had begun to form a real connection. I think that time has come." The envelope now waited in Michael's desk drawer, a final communication from his sister that both attracted and intimidated him. Whatever revelations it contained felt consequential in a way he couldn't quite define. Later that evening, after they had returned to the penthouse and Lily had gone to bed, Michael finally opened the second letter. Unlike the first, written on multiple pages, this one contained only a single sheet of paper. "Michael, if you're reading this, then something remarkable has happened. You've allowed Lily into your life and she has allowed you into hers. Knowing you both, neither would have been easy. There's one last thing you should know. The night before you launched Anderson Technologies, you weren't the only one making a choice that would echo for decades. While you were finalizing your business plan, I was in a hospital room, having just given birth to Lily. The timing wasn't coincidental. I came to New York that week specifically to tell you about my pregnancy and to offer you the investment you needed. But hearing your dismissal of me, and by extension the child I was carrying, I made a different choice. Instead of confronting you, I decided to invest silently, ensuring Lily's future while respecting your apparent wish for distance. I've often wondered what would have happened if I'd knocked on your door that night instead of walking away. Would meeting your newborn niece have changed your perspective? Would knowing about my investment have altered our relationship? We'll never know. What I do know is this. Lily was born on the same day you founded the company that made you a billionaire. Your beginnings are intertwined in ways neither of you realized until now. Perhaps there's a kind of poetry in that synchronicity, a reminder that success comes in many forms, and the most valuable investments aren't always financial. If you've truly connected with Lily, you've already discovered what I learned through raising her, that opening yourself to love, even knowing its vulnerabilities, is the truest form of courage. It's a lesson I wish we could have learned together as siblings, but perhaps you and Lily will learn it as uncle and niece instead. With hope for you both, Hannah." Michael lowered the letter, struck by the final revelation. All these years, he'd marked the anniversary of Anderson Technologies' founding as the beginning of his real life, the day he'd left behind personal entanglements in favor of professional achievement. Now he discovered it was also Lily's birthday, a connection so fundamental it seemed impossible he hadn't known it before. He moved quietly through the darkened penthouse to Lily's room, gently opening the door to check on her. She was asleep, the cardboard piano folded neatly on her nightstand beside a framed photograph of Hannah. Even in sleep she maintained a certain composure, a self-contained quality that reminded Michael of himself at his most guarded. Yet in the weeks since she'd come to live with him, he'd witnessed other sides of her. Moments of spontaneous joy when mastering a difficult musical passage, flashes of vulnerability when speaking of her mother, quiet determination when facing Patrick's manipulations. He was beginning to understand. Not just Hannah's daughter, or a musical prodigy, or a legal responsibility, but a complete person with complexities all her own. The realization both humbled and challenged him. His entire adult life had been constructed around avoiding precisely this kind of emotional investment, this responsibility for another's welfare and happiness. Yet here he was standing in a darkened room, watching over his niece's sleep and feeling not trapped by the commitment but somehow expanded by it. The court would make its final decision on permanent guardianship soon. Patrick's claim, though weakened, remained active. John's health, while improved, continued to limit his role in Lily's daily care. The coalition of adults supporting her, Michael, Eleanor, John, even Judith Winters from a distance, was effective but unconventional. None of it offered the certainty Michael had always demanded in his professional life. There were no guaranteed outcomes, no risk-free strategies. Caring for Lily, truly caring for her beyond legal obligation or family duty, meant accepting vulnerability and unpredictability in ways that ran counter to everything he'd valued for decades. Yet standing there in the quiet darkness, Michael recognized that he had already made his choice. Not in a single dramatic moment, but in a series of small decisions over the past 6 weeks. Each adjusted meeting schedule, each evening spent helping with homework or listening to practice, each conversation about books or chess or music, all were silent declarations of commitment, steps toward the person Hannah had believed he could be, even when he'd lost faith in himself. The following morning, as they sat at the breakfast table, another new routine that had gradually taken shape, Michael pushed a small wrapped box across to Lily. She looked at it quizzically. "What's this for?" "I missed your last birthday," he explained, "and several before that. This is a start on making up for lost time." Lily unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a velvet jewelry box. Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a piano key, with her birth date, the same as Anderson Technologies' founding date, engraved on the back. "Your mother's letter told me we share an anniversary," Michael explained. "My company and your birthday fall on the same date. I thought you should have something to mark the connection." Lily examined the pendant with careful fingers, her expression thoughtful. "Does this mean you're keeping me?" she asked finally, the directness of the question belying its emotional weight. "If you want to stay," Michael answered, matching her honesty with his own. "And if the court agrees. I've filed for permanent guardianship. What about Grandpa?" "He'll always be part of your life," Michael assured her. "We'll visit him regularly and he'll visit us. Same with Eleanor." "You need all of us, I think." Lily considered this, her fingers still tracing the outline of the pendant. "Mom used to say that family isn't about who you're born to, but who you belong with." She looked up at Michael with those disconcertingly perceptive eyes. "I think maybe we belong together. Not because we have to, but because we choose to." The simple wisdom of the statement, so reminiscent of Hannah at her most insightful, caught Michael off guard. "I think you might be right," he managed, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Later that morning, as Michael prepared to leave for a meeting he couldn't reschedule, he paused in the doorway of the living room, where Lily was practicing a new piece Eleanor had assigned. The sound of the piano, once an ornamental silence in his carefully curated space, had become the heartbeat of the penthouse, as essential to its atmosphere as light or air. Lily looked up, sensing his presence. "Will you be back for dinner?" she asked, her fingers stilling on the keys. "Yes," Michael promised, the word carrying more weight than its simplicity suggested. "I'll be back." It was a promise he intended to keep, not just today, but in the days and years to come. The wall of silence Hannah had described in her letter had finally cracked, allowing something unexpected to emerge. Not just a legal guardianship or a family obligation, but a genuine connection between two people who, despite all odds and past mistakes, had found in each other something worth staying for. As Michael stepped into the elevator, he carried with him not just the responsibilities of his corporate empire, but also the weight of a silver pendant, a cardboard piano, and a promise to return, symbols of a different kind of investment, one whose dividends couldn't be measured in financial statements, but in moments of shared understanding and growth. For a man who had spent decades defining himself through acquisition and control, it was a profound recalibration, the recognition that what Hannah had known all along was finally becoming clear to him, that the most valuable achievements weren't built in boardrooms, but in the quiet spaces between people who chose each other, day after day, despite the risks inherent in caring so deeply. And in that recognition lay the truest legacy of Hannah's investment, not the millions she'd entrusted to her brother's business acumen, but the daughter she'd raised with enough wisdom and courage to build a bridge across 20 years of silence, connecting past to future, with nothing more than a cardboard piano and the music that flowed from her fingertips. Dear listeners, we hope that Michael and Lily's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched ours. The melody of their story reminds us that family can be redefined through choices and second chances, that connections can be rebuilt even after years of silence. For more emotionally resonant stories that explore the complexities of family, identity, and redemption, you'll find a specially curated playlist waiting for you. Just click the link to your left. If this tale of unexpected harmony moved you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that delve into the human experience, stories that linger in your thoughts long after the final word. Don't miss our upcoming content that will continue to explore life's most profound themes. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Did Michael's transformation resonate with you? Has music ever built bridges in your own life? Your stories and reflections are the perfect accompaniment to the ones we share. Until next time, may you find harmony in the most unexpected places.